Hi everybody, we're going to be looking at Chapter 2 in our optional Bryk book for organizational theory. As we go through this PowerPoint and then the next one, I want you to keep in mind these are probably the two most important PowerPoints of this book. If you don't get anything out of the Bryk book, as I said, it's optional. Chapter 2 and Chapter 3 are worth you at least watching the videos for. This chapter describes a theory of school organization and school improvement. This can translate to all of your dissertation studies and give you a framework to help you with future research, especially if you're working in an urban school environment. I'm going to try to present this information as clear as I can. If there's anything you don't get or anything you want to talk about, you can always ask me in class, not a problem. So you need to understand that every study that you conduct has a story. The big factor that's going to make your studies mean something and be positive or negative is what's called the so what factor. The so what factor tied to why we looked at Chicago at this point was because it was a large urban school system that was beginning to be decentralized, and that some communities were doing well and some communities were struggling. When this study started, we were under the impression, basically, to be blunt, that all urban schools suck and need improvement. Chicago didn't look that way. Chicago had schools that were doing really freaking good and schools that were struggling. So this made sense at the time because we had good schools in Chicago and schools that needed improvement. So the story made the study. And if you have a story that can make your study is going to be more marketable as well. So you have to understand that the framework was developed in 1993, meaning that we're 20 plus years since this framework has been adopted. So you could take this framework and change it. You would have to make an argument that a lot has changed in schools in 22 years, and then document what has changed. Bryk and the rest of his colleagues found 5 specific concepts that made up the framework. So try to think of what you would present the framework to be and what it would look like for you as well. So we're going to talk about all 5 of the essential supports, just to list what they are. And once again, I don't expect you to be super excited about all of these. I'm more worried about you saying, okay, I could see how professional capacity could help me with my study, or instructional guidance could. We present all 5 of them. You don't have to use all 5 of them. But their leadership is the driver of change, parent-community ties, professional capacity, student-centered learning climate, and instructional guidance. So leadership was the first one that we look at, and even though we say that, I would argue leadership would be kind of pushed down in the line if we were looking at it in 2015 because we're worried about so many other external factors. But in this study, principals were the ones that had to improve the school system. The superintendent gave directives, and the principals were the ones that were responsible for the improvement. All that this basically says is that the school level was cool. They knew they had to do this, but they also had to make improvements at the community level as well. This gave shared leadership, and it allowed the community to be involved in the leadership actions as well. Next, we have parent and community ties. So if the parents are involved in the leadership changes, they can be involved in how leadership looks at the community level as well. So one of the things that the authors of the study wanted to do was say, can we repair the relationship between urban schools and the families that they are serving? So one of the things that the superintendent and Bryk wanted to see was how outreach was used to make the schools more welcoming, and that care and well-being translated appropriately to children and their families. So professional capacity was basically, can the staff do what they were supposed to do, and also did they have the capacity to engage in professional learning communities? Once again, I strongly encourage you to recognize the content from when I'm talking about this. This is a study that I'm mentioning that took place in '93. So we had a lot of teachers that were in schools that were not highly qualified. That has reduced significantly now, so how Bryk approached professional capacity is different than how we would approach it today. All learning climate should be student-centered. This means that we're looking at ways that the students can be involved more intellectually in schools, and also that the projects, activities are relevant for the students in the community they are in. And finally, we have this notion of instructional guidance. This means the curriculum and instruction have to promote academic achievement for every child, and we have to be looking at ways that we can improve programming if the students need additional support or remediation, or also additional gifted support as well. So the one thing that you need to remember for this study, and it comes up page after page in the book, and like I said, you don't have to read the book, but you have to look at different elements of the book that could help you, is this notion that it's about instruction, stupid. That basically shows that every single one of these reform efforts is somehow magically tied back to instruction. If it's not, we have a problem. The responsibility of the school principals is to improve that instruction, and if they can't, then there's an even bigger problem. So what do we do and how do we get ourselves to that level? Well, we have to focus on what happens in the classrooms before we look at everything else. If you believe instruction improves schools, which every one of us does, then the rest of the organization fades into the background. What's important, though, is that in a building with 30 classrooms, not just 1 or 2 classrooms are improving. The good stuff that's going on in those 1 or 2 have to translate to the other 28 classrooms in the building. So if we refocus school around conditions in which teachers work and engage students around subject matter, we are then improving schools. So our key is explaining school organization and how the day-to-day operations work inside classrooms to advance student learning. That's the big idea. So if you want to look at the technical core of what the classroom looks like, this is the framework. This is on page 48. All I want you to do is look at how those 5 suggestions that Bryk and Company made came up with a framework. If you can see and understand how this is done, you're going to have no problem with your dissertation, because that's the meat of your dissertation, is taking that framework, showing how it relates to the literature, and then testing the framework. This is done well on page 48 of the text. So then they take the core and show how outside influences, what's coming in, can benefit the schools. The argument that Bryk was making this entire time, even though it's about instruction and teacher quality and improvement, that schools do better with outside influences. Big idea, main idea from this study, is that parents were involved and could help improve instruction in math more than any other subject area. The reason being is that children are still going to be exposed to reading with environmental print all around. Look around this classroom, look around these other classrooms, there's environmental print. So kids are still going to see words, but math is where they need the essential support that Bryk and Company is talking about. So next we look at the what and how of instruction. So this is basically what's higher level stuff and what's lower level stuff. Anytime you see higher and lower level instruction, you have to think about Bloom's taxonomy, because that really shows what the objectives that students are and should be learning look like and what they should be looking like for an organization. So curriculum organization is the what of instruction. So the goal of curriculum organization is to focus on content standards to improve specific instructional guidance features. If the people in the building don't understand how the curriculum looks, we're never going to improve this. So curriculum instruction becomes a problem as well. So the academic goals of instruction is the how. So once again, as we said in the beginning of this course, a nation at risk will come up 1,000,000 times every time that we're teaching about school and school reform. So in order to explain how we change instruction, the authors referenced a nation at risk. Why a nation at risk? Well, it was only 10 years old at the time. So this basically shows us that the approach they took in looking at the how really tied to a nation at risk. So professional capacity is when you recruit and retain knowledgeable staff. Employee recruitment and employee retention is everything in organizational theory. If we believe that we can improve our school and we can improve our organization, then we can improve how we recruit teachers and retain teachers, and also use succession planning to prepare them to be leaders. Even if you don't prepare somebody to be a leader, if you can make them think they're going to be a leader and give them leadership opportunities and make them feel wanted and valued, the money's not going to matter as much, at least in the short run. So quality of human resources. This is a little different than what I would say is human resources, because I would say human resources is hiring. Bryk doesn't present it that way. Bryk says this is the right teachers at the right place that know how to use the right books, the right technology, and motivate students. Once again, this is why classrooms must be open systems and not closed systems. If we have classrooms that are open systems and we have people that can share what looks good and they can distribute that and give it to others, we've created an open systems environment that can improve school and improve instruction. So professional development. You've already heard me speak in depth about professional development in here. When you're doing professional development, you have to have a theme and a vision for the school year. And every professional development activity has to be built on that theme and vision. We all know, and I've made this argument 100 times, that in August, September, October, we'll all go gung-ho for professional development. By the end of the year, nobody cares about it. You need to have a strategic plan as to how your professional development has to look, and then also opportunity to reflect upon it the next year. Once again then, for the what and the how to work, we need to make sure that we have continuous improvement, meaning that we don't stop. As soon as we know that something else is going right, faculty have to be willing to experiment and try different things to make it even better. You have to be able to do this in a safe environment, and if you can't do this in a safe environment, it's also not going to work. So professional development, really in professional community, talk about this notion of the teacher-proof curriculum. And I haven't had much opportunity to really explore this in depth except for Success for All. So it's the example you're going to hear me say 100 times in this class, and you'll know that, yeah, I hate Success for All, but I hate Success for All because it's scripted learning. It's the one that I saw used in Pennsylvania schools, and the one that I always questioned its effectiveness. That is a teacher-proof curriculum. Understand what teacher-proof curriculum means. That means the teachers have no autonomy over the curriculum, and they don't have freedom to do what they want. On the other end, it's when teachers have freedom, that can be a problem too. I've mentioned the example of me as a teacher, and I was a young teacher. I could do anything I wanted in my business law or my computer science classes. Nobody cared what I taught. They still don't care what I taught. But I taught integrated math. And integrated math directly impacted student standardized test scores. When I taught integrated math, they cared what I did. So I kind of moved into the teacher-proof curriculum on one subject and complete autonomy on the other two. A good administrator is going to find an appropriate balance, maybe help the teachers schedule days on what topics are going to be taught during those days, to tell the teachers, I trust you, you have freedom to teach any way that you want to. So then parent and community ties. Anytime that you look at an urban school and you look at parent and community improvement, if you know that it's already at an F level, the only way is up. And I think this is important in this study because we had some buildings that had a ton of parent and community support and other buildings that did not. So any parent involvement in some of these buildings led to improvement, and they looked at ways to support parents, to support learning, teachers' knowledge about their students' home culture and community, and then building school and community partnerships which are supposed to sustain. The key idea is the sustainability piece, which comes with school and community partnerships. So if parents don't know and understand how to improve child's performance, it doesn't improve. This is why you have to understand how to strengthen parenting skills, get parents to understand what's going on in the school. Big idea, inviting parents to volunteer and creating opportunities for parent voice and decision making. I do want to stress something because remember, I taught this class before and we did use the paper for people to write a comprehensive paper. One paper completely shot down the idea of parent volunteers. It was an urban school and it was an urban setting and said by the time I get my parents to volunteer, well, their clearances come back, some of them can't do it, they feel like they can't be a part of the school, and then some don't even be able to do it in January or February. This is where your planning comes into play. If you want your parents to be effective volunteers for second grade, you start hitting them hard January and February of first grade. If you're going to need parent volunteers in kindergarten, start hitting them in preschool. Here's my opinion on this. You do what you want. I don't want parent volunteers in kindergarten. Kindergarten is the chance for separation between the parent and the student, and for the student to understand the school as an organization. I never was a fan of kindergarten volunteers. I'm a fan of first, second, and third grade volunteers because then the parents get the opportunity to be a part of the school and a part of the community, and it doesn't take away from child development. That has to happen, and that's important. So teachers have to know what's going on in the community. They have to know the homes they are dealing with. This is one of my problems with Ohio teachers. It's the hardest state in the United States to get a job in. If you get a teaching job in Ohio, you've hit the lottery. Pennsylvania, we're challenging, but we are nowhere near as challenging as Ohio. So when somebody gets certified to teach in Ohio, do you know what they do? They take the position. They normally go to a really, really, really bad urban school in Cincinnati or Cleveland. Urban Columbus isn't so bad. You're looking at a lot more just diversity issues than anything else instead of poverty. But urban Cincinnati and urban Columbus is drug cases, gang violence, that sort of thing, and they're not prepared and they don't understand the community. They're coming from Hudson, Sandusky, they're coming from Ashland, they're coming from areas that don't have this diversity, and they don't have knowledge about the home culture and community. This has to be built into professional development for new teachers. You want to keep your new teachers, drive them around the community for 1 or 2 days. I guarantee you, they'll love the idea of it, and it'll make them happy, and it'll make them feel as though they're a part of the community as well. So school community partnerships. Our textbook says you do this through Boy and Girl Scouts and through the YMCA. In the 90s, that was a big idea. There are also other opportunities for school and community partnerships as well. You want to find ways that the students can be engaged in school and fun activities even after the school day ends. That means everything. But in order to do that, you have to have a strong understanding of what the home supports look like and what the potential supports in the community can look like as well. You want to avoid your children having issues with outside influences involved in gangs and in any sort of violence. This is the key right here at strong community partnerships. Remember our context too. We're talking about school community partnerships up through 8th grade. If you can change schools the way that I've suggested they change, and you know it's controversial, but we put our emphasis in 1st grade, year 1. Then we put our emphasis in 1st and 2nd, year 1 and year 2. You've strengthened from the core up, and you've helped to build a better, sustainable school system. So, student-centered learning climate. We're looking at basically three parts of the classroom: order and safety, academic press and personalism, and peer norms. We're going to speak about each one of these. So, order and safety. You have to know this is a Maslow thing, and why we talk about Maslow in all of our classes, and you're sick of hearing about Maslow. Well, guess what? There's a reason why Maslow exists, and you're going to hear Maslow, Gardner, and Piaget. Even though Gardner doesn't want to talk about multiple intelligences anymore, you're still going to hear about Gardner, and you're always going to hear about Maslow and the hierarchy of needs. Schools have a responsibility to provide safety. It's expected. If it's not there, there's a problem in the school. The school has failed. People say, and you know, we read news articles and media articles if we're doing a media literacy class, where they say the school didn't provide self-esteem, therefore the school failed. That's complete and total BS in my mind. If the school doesn't provide order and safety, that school failed. You failed as the principal. You failed as the superintendent. You failed as the security guard. This is mandated and required by federal law that order and safety is provided. Self-esteem, it's a nice thing, but it's not something that's guaranteed. The staff has to feel safe, the students have to feel safe, so they want to come to school and they want to be in school. So teachers have to have academic care, academic freedom, and academic personalism to an extent. How do you do this in elementary schools? This is what I always thought you do. Teachers like reading to students, and it benefits students to sit down and have an animated teacher read to the kids. This is where the teacher should have academic freedom on the books that they choose to read. Also, if you find that students are really enjoying an experiment in science or social studies, why not have a book that talks about one of the projects that they're doing? That way we're still meeting the core objectives of learning, but we're also giving them academic press and freedom to do what they want. You have to have the autonomy and want to hold your teachers and students accountable. You have to let them do what they want and trust in them. Now, if it's a new teacher, you provide them with different supports. If it isn't, that's a little bit different. So, peer norms. Students have to understand this is what we do here. If the staff doesn't demonstrate that the students are supported, we have a problem as well. Students have to support each other, but also hold others accountable. This is so difficult to make happen in an urban school. It's almost impossible to make it happen in an urban school. But if you can find a way to do it as a teacher, you have become a rock star, in my opinion. So trying to find a way that peers hold peers accountable in an urban environment is huge. So then, what do we do for leadership? Well, we look at 3 different divisions of leadership. School principals are responsible for improved outcomes in the schools. I note that research has finally been able to improve this. You have to understand, research didn't prove this until the mid-'80s. Everybody said the principal really didn't impact schools, but it was when we looked at instructional leadership that we say that principals impact schools. It's only been 30 years, guys. We've only been able to say for 30 years that schools have been improved by principals. So we have to look at inclusive, facilitative, managerial, and instructional dimensions as well. Managerial is the basic part of schools. This is how the office is run, and this is how the school works. Good principals get there early. They make sure all the management dimensions are done and set up and ready to go from the previous day. I am of the volition, and you do whatever you want because I know that you have freedom and autonomy. A good principal, if they're supposed to be done at 4 p.m. and there are no extracurricular activities, that principal shuts the door at 4 and they do not go back. Now they're there an hour early in the morning. They're not going to stay after at night. They're going to stay after